Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Gibson. This is my me time. This is Socialization of Abuse. And tonight, for a full hour, I will be talking with you about various forms of abuse. Not only its forms, but its impact on the lives of the people that it affect, of course, but also on some potential remedies. Most people don't get how to remedy abuse, only because it's hard being objective when you're the one on the ground being kicked in the mouth. So it's very difficult for people to oftentimes find themselves in circumstances where they can clearly think about abuse as it occurs to them. This happens all the time, and abusers depend on the fact that you have no one to turn to, you have no central remedy for abuse care itself. So they perpetrate their efforts as best they can as the culprit in your life insofar as abuse is concerned. What I'd like to do is share with you now what my thoughts are on abuse and what supports norm therapy, which is abuse care. It's a therapy designed specifically for abuse care. It took about 3 decades to develop, and it's been implemented for the past couple of years uh, at abuserefuge.org or abuserefuge.org, as well as normtherapy.com. And we've attended to a myriad of patients around the world, and we've helped so many people in their plight with abuse. But one of the most prevalent abuses in the world, I should say, and I want to be clear about this, isn't what you think. So stick around and you'll find out which it is. First of all, welcome to Socialization of Abuse. I'm Michael Gibson. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into the various forms of abuse that are prevalent in our world today. We'll look at their impacts, and we'll also look at how norm therapy and what we do can provide solutions. We're not here to cure anyone. Let's be clear about that. Abuse is not a curable thing. Abuse is a thing you have to do something about. And we teach people what that thing is to do, or in most cases, those things are to do. So, anyway, this episode is packed with essential information and to help us better understand and combat abuse in its many forms. Okay, let's talk about this. Is my first solo interview, and I like this me time. Normally, I'm interviewing people and we're talking about various subjects, just getting warmed up. But now I want to talk about what's very dear to me is abuse and how it affects most of you. We have all kinds of abuse. We have marital abuse. We have financial abuse. We have child abuse. We have sex trafficking abuse. We have PTSD, where you abuse yourself. It's a form of self abuse. We have, of course, then the normal eyes and ears and mouth of relationship or intimate partner abuse. We have work with and to develop strategies and different understandings from around the world. Because abuse in California is different from abuse in London. That's different from abuse in Sydney. That's different from abuse in Lagos. That's different from abuse in Kinshasa. Each of these places, to include China, the Middle East, and a few other places I didn't mention, are all different. What may be a slap in the face in India may not be abuse there in some places and cases, but it may be in Europe or the United States or in parts of South America. And what one would consider rape in some places, oftentimes in a lot of countries, women are raped and it's deemed their fault because they looked too provocative or they looked too beautiful and the man just couldn't help himself. So it was her that did it and not him. We find these disparities in abuse all over the world. And we oftentimes ask ourselves, how is this possible? Well, culture. I always tell people that culture dictates you. You don't dictate culture. And the culture, normally developing over thousands of years, actually dictates what the response is to that abuse or how pervasive or ubiquitous is in society, epidemically or pandemically. So we're going to look at some of those things tonight too to give everybody a better understanding of what we do at Norm Therapy and why. Now, before I get started on our night, there's one thing I want to prepare you for. I want to prepare you to understand that abuse is probably inarticulate, one of the most inarticulate matters on the planet. Why? We all know what abuse looks like. We know what it tastes like. We know what it smells like. We know how it feels, but we don't know how to combat it. We are not equipped with the tools. Mommy and daddy didn't sit you on their knee and say, this is how you deal with narcissistic abuse. Or perhaps this is how child abuse would affect you or your children for the rest of your life. Or here's financial abuse. Dad probably says, here, sweetheart, here's how you balance your checkbook. Or this is what a credit card is like. But it didn't tell you when some gal or some guy comes along and they take your money and hurt you. They didn't tell you about those abuses and how to deal with that or how to make those decisions around those kinds of financial endeavors. Norm therapy takes a very deep dive into all of these areas and many more. We champion 21 abuses, 3 other specific areas, including corporations, police, and educators. We have a norm therapy program for each that helps them with their daily routine of interfacing with people and having more productive outcomes. Talk a lot more about that. And we call that abuse mitigation. We'll go into that a little bit further in future podcasts. Now, let's talk about today. We're gonna do this often, and we're gonna pick a different abuse each time. And today we're gonna talk about self-abuse, child abuse, narcissistic abuse, sexual abuse, and financial abuse. We're gonna try and pack all of that into this hour. Now, this is a condensed form. There's much more to this. If you were to spend a half a minute or a half a day in our norm therapy department over at normtherapy.com or in goarrow.org. That's goarrow.org. If you were to spend a little time with our manager, Kim Carpenter, over there, or with the global executive director, Kelly Dean, you would find out that what we teach our norm therapists are comprehensive. We're paralleling the best we can with the mental health community, but we have our specialty in abuse care. So I want you to understand that from the onset so you'll know that we orient things in that direction. As I said before in the beginning, we are not here to cure anyone. That's not our job. But our job is to equip you and a potential victim or victims and even survivors how to combat the abuse yourself, how to apply the techniques we teach you, how to endorse your own life, how to eliminate that negative talk, and quite a few other things we'll do to help you get on a path to your own wellness. And it'll oftentimes be at your own hands and the strength that you happen to muster while with us. We've done it so many times, it's not even a difficult matter to articulate. But let's go into the first one here. Let's talk about one definition. The number one abuse on the planet, everyone, is what? It's what? Okay, now I'm hoping I get something over here. Okay, it's self-abuse. Self-abuse is probably the most quiet killer on the planet. Self-abuse is one of the most quiet killers on the planet. Oftentimes, in our abuse state, we feel as if we're all alone. We're all alone. We feel like no one else cares. We feel like our pain is not endurable. We feel that we're going to hurt ourselves or we're going to hurt someone around us. We feel a lot of things. And during this feeling process or identifying to self what you're going through the best you can, because like I said in the beginning of this podcast, it's hard being objective when you're the one on the ground being kicked in the mouth. So while you're trying to evaluate your own circumstance or tragedy of circumstance of being in that abusive situation, and then you start to self-talk, that negative self-talk, you start to doubt yourself, you start to gaslight yourself, you start defending everything, you start, the person who always finds themselves making an excuse for their own happiness is a person I will always be able to show you that's being extremely abused, and oftentimes by self. How do we get beyond self abuse? That is the proverbial question. And it has to do with two things. It has to do with knowledge. You have to look to acquire the knowledge about self abuse. If you are ill equipped with the knowledge, you will fail miserably in its effect to try to reduce or eliminate self abuse from your life. So, with knowledge, you have to have a bit of courage. You see, somebody telling you that what you need to do in order to become a better human being, to become a stronger person, to become free of abuse. Somebody telling and relaying this to you may not always be the solution. It's when they hold your hand and give you a hand up, and I don't mean a handout, but a hand up and walk you through the process where you will find what's applicable to your life or not. So, with knowledge, you must always couple that with an action. If you choose to do nothing about it, then nothing will happen, and the status quo or that particular ailing issue in your life will continue. That's just how life works. Has nothing to do with me or what I'm trying to advocate on behalf of norm therapy or the discipline of abuse care. No, it has to do with you. And I think that's the most important part of this. So, self abuse includes behaviors like self harm, substance abuse, and negative self talk. Those three are like, oh my God, the three that will cut your life short. It's a way for individuals to cope with an overwhelming set of emotions or potential solutions. They see what to do about it. They are told what to do about it. Their therapists say, do this and do that about it. And they still don't do it. And they wonder why they don't make that progress. And it isn't their fault either. Abuse is probably one of the most pervasive and ubiquitous forces on our planet. We all see it and we all know it, but we just don't know how to articulate it because abuse is one of the most inarticulate matters on the planet. So I'm going to take my time today and tomorrow and whenever we're doing our next podcast, and you look on our schedules, and I'll give that to you at the end of this podcast, of how to explain abuse to you in lay terms, how to talk you through a process of identifying and understanding your abuse, and then how to eradicate or extricate yourself from that abuse. I think those are the three components we need to concentrate more on, especially in self abuse. When you look at a situation and the potential is great for you, like I just finished college or I just finished a new course and I went into a job interview and I'm gonna go there and I'm gonna get this job. And then when you get ready to walk through the door, you go, oh my God, they're gonna hate me. Oh my God, I don't know what's going on. Help me, please. This makes no sense. Why am I here? Why am I afraid? I'm afraid. I don't know what to do. How can I get through this? I'll lie. No, I won't lie. I can't lie. They'll tell if I lie, if I'm lying. You come up with all these strategies in your head to fail. Not because you're a coward, even though you've been taught to be a coward. It's not that. Most people in society have been taught to be cowards. Turn the other cheek and all of that. That's what we're taught. And we do that as we face situations as well in life. As we become face to face and confront circumstances, we become cowards often because it's not because we're afraid, it's because we don't know what to do. And that frightens us more than being afraid for reasons of being a coward. It's kind of a vicious circle and cycle there, but I think you can see what I'm talking about. The fear of not knowing scares people. It frightens them, especially when a man slaps his wife, a woman hits her husband with a hammer. And we've seen all of these kind of cases. When this occurs, the fear of not knowing how to respond to that, not the fear of getting hit with a hammer, not the fear of being slapped, but the fear of not knowing what to do about it causes the maladaptive coping mechanisms to deal with those abuses. And once you can get beyond the fear of not wanting to, of not knowing what to do, chances are through knowledge, as I mentioned before, and action that occurs thereafter, you'll be able to better be equipped to combat that abuse and to do something about it. And that doesn't mean put up your dukes and fight either. We'll get into more strategies along this podcast in the future, but we want to get to some areas now. So self abuse leads to so many other things. So let's look at something. Did you know that 17% of all adolescents, 17% worldwide, engage in self harm, cutting themselves, burning themselves, shaving and tattooing and covering up marks and cuts and stitches? 17%. That's a sixth of our global population of children who are self harming today, right now. And did you know that as a precursor to substance abuse is normally self harm? And 8% of our global population of adolescents are experiencing illicit substances that may harm their futures and impair their lives by the use of drugs. They're doing that now, 8%. So 1/12 of our population of children around the world are involved in these areas because of self abuse. Self abuse is the gateway to all of the things, because if you can do it to yourself and hurt you, why can't everyone else? That's how the brain works. Wait a minute, you're conditioning me to hurt me, and I must be okay with it because I'm hurting myself every day and I'm going down a path that I otherwise will not be able to recover. So why can't I let my neighbor abuse me, or the girl down the street, or the narcissist I'm dating? Why won't I let them hurt me? Why not? Everybody hop on board. This is how abuse becomes pervasive in your life. This is how it becomes in everything you do, ubiquitous. And I think I'm spending so much time on self abuse right now because this is your gateway to your own hell that you create. Not me. I'm just a therapist, a norm therapist trying to say, hey, get your head out of your ass. That's what I'm trying to say. Nothing more. But you'll never do it if you believe that it should be up there. And that's the problem. You condition yourself to believe so many untruths that you become a part of your own narrative, and you don't even know that you're the star of your own story. So self-abuse is pretty impactful, and it leads to physical injuries, permanent physical injuries, oftentimes infections. You never know why you have an infection because you have so many cuts in your white blood cells and everything else that's combating the infections that you're getting from cutting and burning. They take on transformative natures in your body, and a bacterialist or bacteriologist or a biologist or a doctor can explain to you how, too many cuts can cause too many different kinds of reactions from your body and could cause you harm. Um, and even accidental death. I say accidental because, nobody wants to say, well, she was cutting herself so long, or he was cutting himself that long that he just one day decided to stab himself in the throat and now he's dead. Nobody really wants to say that, but that's the cold truth. That's what happens. And here's another thing: abuse, especially self abuse, is the gateway to suicide. It's the one thing suicide victims have to experience before they kill themselves, is they have to have that self-doubt. They have to have that self-deprecation. They have to have that self-denial. They have to have that self-pain, that negative talk. They have to talk themselves into dying. So be careful. Suicide is the number one issue for people who experience self-abuse. So let's talk about solution through CBTs, cognitive behavioral techniques, or therapy. Um, that's a way through the rapid eye movement and hypnosis and quite a few other techniques that's used. But more importantly, the best cognitive behavioral uh, therapy you can use is, and I think that coupled with talk therapy, is your own self hypnosis. And not like you're going to hypnotize yourself. That's not what I'm saying. But since abuse is a conditioning, nobody sits down and say, I want to be abused. But it's a form of condition. You condition yourself to live with the abuse. Well, you can also condition yourself to not live with the abuse, how to combat that abuse, and how to create effective measures in your life to prevent abuse. This is also very doable. So we'll talk about more of that. And remember, I only have an hour, but you have to reframe your negative thoughts. And we help with that at Norm Therapy. I'm going to do an entire episode on negative thinking. And I will show you when you least expect or even know that you're negatively thinking, how to combat it and how to curtail or stop it. I think that is something that most people would probably pay a nickel for. But I'm going to show you how to do it, and I'm going to make it very humanistic. So it's not something you need to lay on somebody's couch for 10 decades or 2 decades to figure out. Okay, self-worth is everything when it comes to a person who self-harms, self-abuse. Self-worth is like the kryptonite to self-harm and self-abuse. Because once you know your value, you're never going to know your value by you telling you your value. Just tell yourself you're going to be great. Let's do some affirmations. From all of my experience over these decades dealing with abuse, that never works. That only ever works after you've confronted your abuse head on. This is very important. You have to be able to personalize your strategy with the abuse that you're enduring. And I just gave myself a thumbs up, I'm thinking. But there you go. You have to be able to personalize it and make it a part of your narrative of what is your worth. And it's not going to be because you tell yourself it's your worth. It's going to be someone else telling you that it's your worth. Somebody that you trust or that you would love to trust, or you listen to on a podcast, or you listen to on a radio show, or you watch on television. Don't even have to be a personal relationship. But what it has to be is genuine. And if you have someone who can genuinely speak to you in a manner where you feel good about the outcomes of the conversations you're having and their effects on you, then that is what you need to follow. And you need to look for people who only add value to your life. Because once someone can see your value, then it's no longer you having to fool yourself into thinking that your biased opinion of you is correct. Now you're looking at third party people saying you're okay and you're on the right path and you're doing those right things in order to ameliorate or make better your life. This is how you begin your journey to overcome self-abuse. Now, I can go on with this for quite some time, but remember, in court of law, they say you must have motive and opportunity to have committed that crime. So they're always looking for motive and they're always looking for opportunity. Now we talked about self-abuse, and we're going to get back into it a little later on in the podcast. But we want to talk about again another abuse, one of the other ones I told you we would discuss, and that we're going to talk about child abuse. This is probably one of the most pervasive abuses. It's not as prevalent as uh, self-abuse. That's a quiet killer. But child abuse is a hidden killer. It's obfuscation of killing of a child's spirit and physical self. When you kill a child's spirit, you've removed their opportunity to grow in a way that's healthy for them. When you take advantage of their sexual parts, you take advantage of their physical self, when you take advantage of their self-worth as an adult or another child or a sibling. When you do this to a child, you are robbing them of their humanity. How do we get those children back? I'm not a child psychologist, but I've seen a lot of abuse care cases with children. And one of the biggest or best strategies with a child anywhere in the world and in any culture is that child needs to feel that they can be protected and that they matter. Because it's easy for a child to drift off into the land of nothingness because they already feel inferior because they're a child in the first place and they're curious beings. And so that strong support system that's being discussed in our commentary is very important. You have to have strength of character and heart and understanding of issues otherwise not familiar to you. You must have those in order to combat child abuse. Remember, the first thing I said in this podcast is you have to possess knowledge. And there's a lot of it out there, and not all of it is good. We've taken painstaking measures over decades of time, and especially over the past 6 years, to develop for people what abuse looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, what it feels like, and more importantly, what to do about it. What do you do about abuse? Most people don't get that part. And I think that is what scares people into thinking that they don't have a problem with abuse. We've had so many people come through our sessions and being patients or norm therapists or volunteers, and they say the same thing oftentimes. I didn't even know that one is abuse. What? Financial abuse is an abuse? I didn't know that. Was that child abuse in my life that I experienced? I didn't know that. Remember, abuse is the most inarticulate thing on the planet because we know when we see it, we just don't know how to respond or reply to it. The little girl, pretty little girl with the green eyes and the sandy hair in the park being choked by her mother. You know it's abuse. You see it, you know it, but you don't know what to do about it. She's being choked by her mom. You see it. You got your dog in one hand, your kid in the other hand, and you're looking over there like, what the hell is going on? But you don't know how to articulate the solution. Oh, if I get involved, I'll get shot, or I'll endanger my children, my dog will get killed, or you come up with whatever excuse you can because there is no knowledge that people have that's homogenized throughout our societies on the planet of how to deal with abuse. The best thing to do to an abuser is walk up to them as they're abusing somebody and stare them right in the eyes. Let them ask you, divert their attention from a child. Why are you there? Don't say a word. Just let them ask you. Start there. So long as they're in dialogue with you, they won't be harming that kid. Don't look down at them like they're nobody and they're crap. They probably think that what they're doing is correct. Their dad taught them that. Their mom taught them that. They learned it when they was a child. So they think they're absolutely correct for choking their daughter. You can't look down at them. Look at them. Once you look at a person, they get to learn to look at themselves back. Don't say a word. Try it, and you'll watch to see quickly that people will reframe how they deal with that circumstance. And it'll be you that caused that effect. That's just one of hundreds of techniques. Now, it could get dangerous. Yes, it could. It could. And you have to take precautions and measures and situation awareness and in self-awareness. A lot we also teach at norm therapy. But it's worth it to stop that child from being forever destroyed. And that parent will always look at themselves as you looked at them that day in that park. So child abuse is very dear to me. As a matter of fact, anyone who knows me knows that if you talk about anything that happened to children, that I lose perspective on life. It's my Achilles heel. I tell you, it hurts my heart because they're the most defenseless being and most innocent beings on the planet. And we adults destroy them. And don't you hate it when you hear a parent say, I did my best? I hate that more than anything. And I don't hate a lot of things, but I hate it when a parent says, I did my best, especially if their child turned out a way that they didn't want. Because that's never is enough, and it's never been enough in the history of the world. Having a child is an ongoing experience. It takes on its own life, that relationship, and it stays and it changes forever. So when a parent does the, oh, I did my best thing, they were probably terrible parents, period. And they didn't know it. Most parents don't know they're bad. Some do, but most don't. And remember, education and action are the two things that need to occur to know. Education and action. So don't want to go into too many things. So we're already at half of our time gone, and we've only talked about child abuse and we've talked about self-abuse. And I can talk about, maybe I should have just had a couple of others, but I'm going to also talk about narcissistic abuse, and then I'm going to talk about the other abuses later. Let's stick to these three abuses today. But let's talk about what is narcissistic abuse. It's the abuse characterized by manipulation, gaslighting, emotional exploitation by someone with narcissistic traits. Doesn't mean always that they're fully diagnosed as a narcissistic. Those traits, a victim of a narcissist oftentimes have the same traits as the narcissist. They're called narcissistic tendencies. You spend 6 years with a narcissist, or 10 years with a narcissist, or 3 months with a narcissist, you begin to learn their jargon. You begin to learn how they respond. You begin to fall in to play with them. And you see that it's effective on you, not because you're unbiased, because you're not. You're very biased during this process. But you see that it's working on you, so you feel you should share that with the world. You should go ahead and exude your narcissistic tendencies to the world and get your narcissistic fix from it. This is what oftentimes happens with narcissists. Narcissists know a couple things. There's 3 personalities in the world. Even every psychiatrist and psychologist in the world would agree with me. The narcissist, the sociopath, and the psychopath. Those 3, oh my God, that's work. Forget the psychopath. You can't do anything to help them. The only entity on the planet that can help a psychopath is the psychopath themselves, period. You can put them in a medication, that'll help a little bit. You can put them into a straitjacket or into a facility, that'll help a little bit. But you're not going to change a psychopath. It's impossible. Now, there have been advances made all over the world in this area, but there's no cure for psychopathy. You're not going to change a psychopath. A sociopath is hard to change, but something has to always be in it for them. When you're sociopathic or sociopathy, you have to get something in it for you all the time. Remember, the psychopath is so deluded, they don't care what they get out of it. Normally it's for them, but they could care less. It's their narrative, and that's all that matters. The sociopath includes you into their narrative, but they include you in a way where they can use you and utilize you and hurt you at the same time, or be oblivious to hurting you. But that narcissist, that's a different kind of beast. Even though it has sociopathic and psychopathic logic to it in some areas, that narcissist can feel that they're hurting you. They know that they're manipulating you. They know that they're controlling you. Matter of fact, they get their high, or what they call a narcissistic fix, off of dealing with you. If they can hurt you and allow you to sustain their narcissism for any period of time, they will take fully advantage of it and get their fix. It's like a shot of heroin, or taking some amphetamines, or smoking a strong ganja or something. They get their hit off, or their high off of it. So unlike sociopathy and psychopathy, unlike those, the narcissist gets off on it. And they know they're wrong most of the time, but in their head and heart, they've conditioned themselves to believe they're right. So they're constantly fighting against themselves, but also with you. Now, do they care? If it involves them, yes, a narcissist cares. If it involves them. And that's what you will get out of that caring process when you try to figure out how do you get along with this person or move on with this person. Very difficult because they won't be thinking about you as a priority. They won't want to see you do better. They, I hear this all over the internet now, but I've been saying it for the past 30 years. People want to see you do better. They just don't want you to do better than them. That's really important. People don't want to see you do better than them. The narcissist fits that fold very well. They believe you are subpar compared to them, that you don't matter as much as they do, and that anything that they tell you has to be governed by the truth in your heart, not necessarily theirs, even if they know they're lying to you or not. It has to be your truth that they're giving and providing you. Sounds familiar? The one good thing I like about the narcissist, just one, is they're easy to target. They're easy to say this person is a manipulating narcissist, a self-involved narcissist, a malignant narcissist, an extreme narcissist. They're easy to find. But why do we end up with narcissists? Hmm. A lot of women have asked me this over the years. Do I have a sign on my back that says, find me, I need a narcissist? Or a patch on my forehead that says, I got 100 guys to choose from in this room, and the only two narcissists here, number 67 and 32, I picked both of those. And they wonder why. Well, there's a simple explanation for it. If all you've ever done is been around narcissistic men, for instance, for that particular case, then those identifiable victim markers that you portray will be the kind of anxiety you have, the kind of uncertainty you have, the kind of always looking for answers and somebody to answer the questions for you, that kind of thing that you have. The narcissist sees that. It's like throwing bait in the water and they're just reeling you in every time. They not only will choose you, but you will choose them because they're giving you exactly what you're looking for because that's all you've known are narcissists. Remember, education and action are the first two things you should always remember when it comes to abuse, period. Now, let's get on to a couple more subjects here because I want to get back to the impacts for a while. So narcissism or narcissistic abuse, child abuse, and self-abuse. I think we'll stick with those today. Um, at Norm Therapy, we educate victims and survivors of abuse. We do. We provide them coping strategies, a myriad of coping strategies, and facilitate support groups. We do that in our training, and now we're going to be doing it in more of a therapeutic environment as we grow the organization post-funding. So that's something you all want to watch out for. We'll be having abuse groups pop up all over the country, and it'll be called abuse mitigation groups. And any kind of abuse you want to bring to the table, we'll have an expert sitting in that group helping to moderate and helping people find solutions. And this will be free of charge. Now, sometimes abuse takes on other forms and other impacts in your life, and it does require therapy. And because we are not here to supplant mental health care at all, that's not what we're doing. We're here to augment and build on the environment. Only 16% of the people in the world even have access to good mental health care. Period. 16%. So if that's the case, just imagine how it is when at the end of, uh, I'm sorry, I got some message. Even imagine how it is at the end of your therapy with abuse, that, even less. amount of therapists and trained individuals are out there in order to uh, tackle abuse. So we'll talk more about that too. Um, and it has to be in subsequent sessions because I do enjoy talking by myself. I really do. I like interviewing people, and I've interviewed everybody, and I'm going to keep interviewing people probably till the day I retire. I don't want to say die because the universe kind of got a way to make that happen. So I want to say till I retire. And but I think that it's good sometimes just to have a rant day or two where you can educate people on some issues. Because I want to talk about some of the papers I've written, some of the techniques we use at norm therapy. People are coming into us all the time and they're seeing its effect and how it's helping abuse victims all over the world. And we're on every continent except for Antarctica. So you'll know we have norm therapists on every continent with the exception of Antarctica because, of course, I guess it's just too cold up there. But let's go in here to talk about, for instance, when you're controlling someone's finances, and we'll talk about financial abuse the next time. I just want to quickly mention that normally the elder or the elderly community are most victim to that. And I think we're going to do an entire show on that. I want to get a little bit more research completed so we can talk about that at length. And so if you have a parent, an aunt, a brother, a sister, or someone who's been committed to one of these facilities or moved into one of these residential environments, oftentimes those are some of the places, hubs for crime, not because they're bad places, but sometimes they have bad people. And so we'll talk about that kind of help in the future. I just want to keep everybody to understand we champion over 21 abuses. If you go to Arrow, abuserefuge.org or goarrow.org, goaro.org, and you look under the abuses, under the abuses tab, you have to be signed into the website. So you have to open up an account and sign in, but it'll explain all of our abuses that we champion plus more. And it'll explain it to you in context. And it'll also uh, provide you with the identifiable victim markers. So when you see abuse, you'll know how to categorize that abuse based on those identifiable victim markers that we've created as a term we've developed for our industry. Okay, now, child abuse, I talked about earlier, and I want to go back to. I think one of the main factors for child abuse, at least indirect child abuse, when it's not you that's abusing your child, it's someone else. When you have a caregiver that provides a service to you for your child, and you're not totally aware of that individual, their history, you haven't spent time with them behind closed doors with your child, you've not watched your child respond to them in a way that makes you curious on why they're responding, or if you see sudden bedwetting or anything that could potentially identify something going on with that child, then you're a bad parent. And you know something? That's okay. It's not okay to be a bad parent, but it's okay to be bad and then figure out how to be good. I think that's education in action. When kids show signs of being nervous or um, axiomatically hurting themselves or running away from somebody when they come in or instinctively hide from certain people, or when they pick them up, they struggle to get out of their arms. Those are all signs that there could be something potential there. There's a there. And when you ignore them, oh, that's just Uncle Fred. Give him a hug. Oh, that's just your grandmother. Give her a kiss. That's just your granddad. What are you doing? Give him a hug. He missed you. When you do that as a parent, you don't know. Maybe before you said those things, you should probably find out. It's not that your grandfather or their cousins or their caregiver are actually doing anything, but it behooves you as the parent to investigate first before you let your child loose. Or let's say they go on a play date. You don't know those parents of their friends. You don't know that Uncle Harvey, who spent 20 years in the penitentiary, is visiting them. You don't know. You- and then when your child is destroyed because you didn't bother to find out a little bit more education about these kinds of endeavors these days, or to act on that education, that's going to hurt your child for the rest of their lives. I've seen it. I've dealt with these people, and it's hard. Children become adults, and they become, if they're flawed children, chances are they end up flawed adults. This is what happens. It has nothing to do with you per se. It has to do with your situational awareness and your self-awareness. So once you're educated and you can be a little bit more self-aware and you can be a little bit more situationally aware, then you'll stop doing those kinds of things that I did my best. My child is now 18 or 21. They've gone off to college. I've done it. Okay, I'm retiring. I throw my hands up. That's not a parent, because your job as a parent is never over. Not ever. It's just forever, and that's it. And as soon as we get that back into our brain housing groups, the less crime that will be perpetrated upon our children, especially by way of child abuse, especially child sexual exploitation or sexual abuse. They're selling children these days. They're literally selling children. They're educated people in situations of authority or positions of authority where they're identifying children to rings of people who buy and sell these children. And they're providing that service with the callousness of a pro wrestler. All they care about is taking you down and pinning you. And that's all they do with these children, is take them down and pin them to that life. Child trafficking and sex trafficking and human trafficking are the most egregious forms of abuse we can perpetrate upon another. We'll have absolutely more sessions on that. Now, let me go down here of some key points I want to just share with you. We've covered a few forms of abuse today, and we talked about the impacts and how norm therapy can recover and regain control in your life. If you're someone who's experiencing abuse right now, I'm not talking about arguing with your mate or being upset at your neighbor or having a hissy fit with your parents. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the kind of abuse that's so terrible that it's hard to articulate, because you know it's abuse and you know it's wrong. You just don't know what to do about it. If you're experiencing that kind of abuse, or someone around you is experiencing that kind of abuse, then you need to really visit our websites and learn as much as you possibly can. The global executive director, Kelly Dean, of the nonprofit, which is Abuse Refuge Org, actually endured 16, 18 of the 21 abuses and the other three areas that we champion at Norm Therapy now. Listen to some of her stories. Sometimes they're subtle, and then you get it. You get the punchline. You go, oh my God, that's happened to me, you'll say. So many people have said that. They didn't know it was abuse. Once I asked someone very close to me, I said, you do know that the story you just told me, you were actually raped. And they didn't know it. They didn't know that. They said, I was raped? I said, yeah, the way it was against your will, wasn't it? You didn't approve it, did you? You didn't like it, did you? You felt violated, didn't you? Yeah, 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 yeah. That's rape. And you know what her comment was to me after that? She said, well, then I've probably been raped my entire life. How powerful is that? It's inarticulate. When you don't have any other information to go by other than what you believe is your unbiased and unfettered path to clearness or clarity, then you're going to not have the proper perspective on abuse. There's no way you can combat it. This is what predators out there, another term I came up with, I call them proximity predators. People who are in your proximity who can hurt you and you can't do anything about it. Your parents, your teacher, your policeman, the choir director. You cannot You can't get away from it. These people are in your midst, and other people around you approve of them. So whatever they do to you in your little brain as a child or even a young adult, you believe it's correct because their mom and dad approves of them. So why can't he abuse me and hurt me like this? Why? I don't want anything to happen to my parents. They probably say, I'm going to hurt your parents if you say anything. So I don't want daddy and mommy to die. So I'm going to go along with it. But if you're not on your game, parents, watching those children, if you're not on your game, then somebody else will be on their game watching them for you. And this is how abuse occurs. So I wanted to just quickly cover back over that. But I want to say something to you. Pain, when I was in the military, I spent a little time in special forces, for those of you who don't know. And that's a real tough gig. There's nothing easy about special forces. It takes the most elite kind of individuals on the planet to even exist in this environment and to operate daily from one extreme to the other daily. It takes a very special kind of person. But you know what is probably the most telltale sign of a special forces operator in life? The most telltale sign that the person is an operator and they can really get some stuff done is training. The level of training that a special forces soldier or Navy SEAL or a Delta guy or a few other organizations I can think of, the one thing that sets them apart or us apart from the rest of the world is our training and then our experiential knowledge. Once you have the experience, once you have the training, and then that reinforced training, and then you have teams of people that you work with all the time, and you end up depending on them for your very life, and they yours or theirs. When you get to that point in anything you do in life, you become almost a subject matter expert in that area because you're living it, you're breathing it, and you're surviving through it. The same thing that happens when you are raising your children or when you're helping your children deal with self abuse or when you're dealing with a narcissist. The more training you have, the more discipline you have, the more study you have, the more you can say and the more you can do. Remember, education and action. Those are the very two first things you should do for any kind of abuse if you want to make a dent in that effort because we're biased people. If I ask you what's your best trait, you're going to tell me, well, I listen very well and I'm a good speechwriter and I talk to everybody and I give them some type of, whatever. I give them all kinds of advice and friendship and love. You'll say that. But in reality, because you're biased, that'll probably not be true. If you ever read a research called Dunning-Kruger, it explained to you your biases. It explained to you why it's impossible for you to self-evaluate accurately unless you have many years of experience understanding self and the concept of self-evaluation. It is impossible without proper training and without years of understanding of yourself to self-evaluate. And I look forward to other interviews in the future, and I look forward to opportunities to share more pieces of information with you. We're going to talk about many other abuses, but we're going to talk about those in context. And we're going to bring up some abuse cases when I'm solo and not interviewing someone. And maybe we'll do it while interviewing others. We're going to bring up some cases. We're going to talk more about it. We're going to get you the stuff you need in life in order to exist with abuse and how to eradicate it from your life and how to recognize it and articulate it. We know it's abuse. We just can't always find the words or the response. At Norm Therapy, we help you find the response. We teach you the words and we make sure you have a lot of practice using them. Our therapy is a little bit different. We teach you how to fish. We don't just give you fish. We teach you how to fish. And that's our approach and it works. So I'm going to go off and sign off a couple minutes early today, but I want to go ahead and read a couple things to you guys that I think you need to know about our organization. And I hope you enjoyed our conversation tonight. I really enjoyed it. So if you enjoyed and got something out of today's live podcast, share this live session with a friend who could benefit from this message or a loved one. Please go to goarrow.org and normtherapy.com and explore our opportunities and seek help for yourself or someone needing our services. Now, if you're interested in being on this show with me so I can interview you, go to contact or email us at contact@normtherapy.com. Now, if you're interested in Norm Therapeutic Services, where you or a loved one or someone else may need our services, send an email addressing that directly to the same email address. Or you can go to goarrow.org, goarrow.org, and look for filling out our victims form, and someone will reach you once they receive that form as well. It's a very comprehensive form, so be prepared to sit down for a while and write things out. Thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see you again on Sunday, July 21st at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I'll be interviewing Dylan Texan. He's an NTIS Level 3 certified norm therapist, and Anthony Marshall. He's a consulting independent contractor for norm therapy. I look forward to seeing you in the future, and thank you all for all of your attention today, and I'll see you in the future.